All right. Hey, Brian, and we're back. So today's topic is a juicy one.
Hmm.
Um, Auditing and supplier quality inspection. So let's say we learned about outsourcing quality. We
Hmm.
talked about virtual quality companies, and we just wrapped up on micro testing and when that's appropriate to outsource.
Hmm.
But a key part of outsourcing, you mentioned quality agreements for sure. That's to stand up before we even begin any relationship. But how about auditing them? And if you have a supplier, what does it look like to do, supplier quality inspections? Talk to me about that because I know you have a lot of experience doing this.
Yeah, part of my roles when I was both in industry and existing outside of industry in a consultant capacity is to perform supplier quality inspections. And really, you have to have an understanding of everything that goes into performing a supplier quality audit or inspection, right? So you need to have an understanding of good documentation practices, of validation, environmental monitoring and controls, sanitation, pest control. You need to be like a good generalist to be able to poke beyond just the surface level. And so often when we outsource these functions to third parties, they've got to be experts with respect to quality systems. There's a lot of great third party organizations that do supplier quality inspections that can serve industry or other organizations to be able to do so. But you cannot, and they are acting on your behalf in that
Right.
capacity,
That's
right? They are an
important.
extension of you. So again, can't go back to this enough. The agreement that you have with that audit function or that third party function is critically important to outline what you expect them to do. And that goes with even pre audit management, right? So if you're outsourcing quality, you need to get a view on the facility or the organization with which you'll do inspection. So what are they manufacturing? Do they give you authorization to look at things? I've done supplier quality inspections before where sites are saying things are quote like trade secret and or we can't share that information with you. Well, that's a massive red flag for me personally. If you're not
Yeah.
willing to share something, because we all have NDAs in place, it's not like you can't be giving me information or I'm going to go blab it out to the world about something that I identify. And when it comes to the performance of that inspection time frame, spend the days there. Because of the pandemic, we got used to mixed audits, right? So much like we're having a conversation right
Right.
now, an audit could
Mhm.
be via virtual meeting in some cases. So how do you manage and navigate that? Which was a really interesting time frame to do so. So I've had it before where individuals can use like Google Glasses and or some sort of device that is live feeding what we're looking at. But the pitfall to that is they can then direct you what they want you to look at, right? So do not pay attention to the man behind the curtain. Basically, I'll show you something that I think puts us in the best light. So there can be another facet to that, which is just sort of documentation review that can be done potentially anywhere else or somewhere, but you've got to go to that facility if they have
Yeah.
one, right? And so, what if they don't? Then, what does that mean in terms of how we're performing the inspections and auditing? And by the way, it's not just a one and done. You
Mhm.
should be sort of risk ranking or categorizing your suppliers according to criticality. And so, certainly, I'd hope that they have backup suppliers as well, just for supply chain purposes and continuity of manufacturing or products. But in that case, you've got to perform things on an ongoing basis, generally based on previous inspections, supplier risk. There's a lot of different facets that go into to performing supplier quality inspections. But at the end of the day, like I said, they are acting on your behalf. Um, and so good communication. And by the way, audit follow up, meaning if you issue that provider or that manufacturer inspection items, I would expect them to take the same approach as it would be a regulatory inspection.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm
that's what I would expect.
I'm all for remote, hybrid, and
Yeah.
virtual aspects of our business.
Right.
But I would say that supplier quality audits is probably the exception to that rule.
Yeah.
Under extreme circumstances like we had during COVID, hybrid makes sense, or
Yeah.
even full virtual made sense, right? Because it meant either doing it that method or not at all. And
Right.
not at all is not an option. So, but now that we're back flying in the sky, I think that it makes sense that these things are done in person.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how much I've learned from being on site at a vendor or a supplier about their business
Yes.
and and about how they manage their people and about how they manage investigations or contamination, right? How transparent they are, like you mentioned. And again, it goes back to outsourcing is all about the relationship between
Right.
you and that supplier, that vendor, that contract lab, that CDMO. And
Right.
that relationship, that transparency, the contractual agreements, and they're performing a function on behalf of you. They
Right.
reflect you and your company's standards and your company's morals. And so I'm
Yes.
all for going in person. And I think you can absolutely contract that out, like you mentioned. So maybe you as a manufacturer, you're contracting, you have a supplier of an API or another raw material, even simple raw materials, or maybe even filters. Who knows? Like it could be a huge, massive supply of depth filters. Who knows? But you want to see how they're manufactured.
Right.
You want to see how
Absolutely.
they're sterilized. You want to see how they're handled and that they're just not like tossed around their warehouse and stuff, right? You want to know that the product you're getting on a consistent basis is indeed, of the highest quality to your standards as a company.
Yeah, and I think to that point, if you go and look, you have to go look at those. You can start with a quality survey, which gives you sort of a baseline
Yep.
of understanding, but you absolutely have to go to the site. It can give you some real insight into change management as well. And
Good word.
oftentimes, does is like for like really like for like,
Right.
you know,
Yeah, for sure.
particularly as it pertains to key ingredients or part of your API production, as an example. And I think you can't also forget for cause audits. So,
Right.
ultimately, they are providing you with a service and or a physical product that you're using within your manufacturing. Well, you still have to do your receiving inspection. You may outsource testing of that raw material to another party, but if they're giving you a raw material or a product that is not meeting your quality standards, how do you manage and navigate that? Is
Absolutely.
it a for cause audit? Is that defined in your quality agreement as well that you have the right to be able to do so? Becomes critically important. So it's not just that periodic, every 2 to 3 year on site, or in this case, maybe virtual supplier quality inspection, but it could be, if they're not providing you with what you expect, you have every right to be able to go there and figure out what's going on.
Agree. And there are some materials that are so critical to our processes.
Yeah.
I often think about, maybe I should ask you this. I often think about environmental monitoring media.
Yeah.
Like again, something else like a subtle plate that is adjacent to open product.
Right.
Like open product is so precious. It's the mecca of everything we do, right? And so here we just purchase media and media. I can't tell you that I've seen the manufacturing conditions of all
Mm.
the different vendors of media that I've used throughout my career.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee you that I know they're not all created equal. And
Yeah.
so, just thinking about, of course, we have like big name companies that have stellar reputations. But it's really interesting. And I know even those big name companies have manufacturing issues.
Yeah.
Like if it can break, it will happen and you'll have a manufacturing. I've had a lots of EM media or buffers reagents that didn't meet our internal standards and our internal material
Yeah.
specifications. And I've had to reject them. And you can't just simply reject them. You need to know what's going on and you should expect that there's an investigation. If they don't manage that investigation, you need to walk your booty up on down there and go
Yeah.
inspect them because
Yeah.
I think when things become virtual, when things become global, we lose sight of who is the customer and who is the provider.
Yeah. That
Especially when you've got like open standing POs for like 5 to 10 years. You lose sight of that, and you can't lose sight
yeah.
of that. It's important.
For particular materials, I know previously I've had it before where even internally within our organizations, and these were big international, corporations saying, well, we're not a big enough player for them to be able to change or do something, or they're not going to have us on site for some reason. I'm like,
Oh, that can't be
really?
true, right? That can't be true. I've
Yeah,
had big player vendors change the way that they've packaged filters for
yeah.
metro testing. Big player vendors. And that's because, and I was 22, I don't know, 22 years old. And I was just like, every time I would open, I don't know if you remember like filter cup trays that like
Oh,
you would
yeah.
have on
Yep.
automatic filter machines. I won't name any brands.
Yeah.
But I remember very distinctly, there were three stacked and then they had an outer packaging.
Yeah.
And the moment I opened the outer packaging inside the hood, like all three were no longer considered sterile. And I'm like, this can't make sense. Three trays in one, once I breached sterility that packaged. Like, what's going on? I
Right.
literally, like on a whim, emailed that big wig name
Yeah.
company and said, why don't you individually package these trays? Or if you need to package them in threes, have an individual sleeve there.
With
Because
each one. Yeah.
yeah, I don't need 27 of them. They're like 3 rows of 3. I don't need 27 of them all the time. And so then I'm going to stick them back in a cardboard, like a not a cardboard. They're like that plastic
Yeah.
firm material. If I'm losing the word right now, and it's like that's it, and then they're no longer sterile. Like no, that's not good. But that's a great example when I simply emailed them. They considered the change and reconfigured their
Yeah.
packaging. And I know many examples of that. People have done that. So
Yeah.
absolutely give them that feedback. All right, well, let's end on that. We've got some more micro topics coming up, and I look forward to chatting more with you. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah. Speak with you soon.